let's go ahead and look at the panels from the index.php, because the panels kind of changed from the last video. So if we go back to our actual files, if we go to our index, which is our main file, you'll notice that I include once connect.php and then our session start. I'm not going to go completely into index yet because there's a lot to index, the mapping system we're going to do in the next video, but I do want to go to the actual tables and the panels. So the first thing I always do is I go ahead and take my session of my player and get the info for it. I just query for the player, and depending on what you need from that page, you'll want to change this from all to whatever you need. That way the query isn't so big, but for now I just have all. Um, so if the is set this the player session is set, then we want to query it. If not, then sorry, not logged in. Our wrapper that we have, which is the same as before, we have the wrapper that goes around all the tables, and then we have our table, which is the logo table. Then the actual left-hand table is panel back, which is basically the background of it. And if we go into our images, you'll see that's where I have that white image that looks a little different than the actual background. And our panel back is right here. So let's drop it in Adobe. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. And you'll see that it's just like the other panel that we had, except for it's kind of opposite. You know, instead of it going from blue to white, it's going from white to blue. So if we look in here, you'll see how that effect kind of works. To where that way it gives it kind of highlights it like I was showing before. But that's basically how I did it there. I just made the background of that whole table, which is only basically this right here. Then we want to we have a div called panel area, which will be in our table, and we're going to include stat panel. And if we open up stat panel, this is actually our left hand stat panel. What I've done here is I made another div called left text, basically L text, and we're echoing the player's name. Now it's important to know that whatever variables that you have in our index, being that you're including the stat panel, you're going to also have them over here on the stat panel, so you don't have to sit there and do two queries. Then we're gonna give the class, and then we're gonna give the level. And if you notice on here, you'll see the class and our level. And the name. The next thing we're gonna have is our strength icon, our ability, endurance, IQ, and cash icon. And I've made the fonts bigger. That's where the font size +3 is coming from. And then I'm just echoing out the actual stat of the player and ending the font. And you'll see that's basically the picture, and then I've increased the font, stopped the font, made a picture, increased the font, and kept going all the way down. And that's where all that's coming from. And the images are basically right here in your images folder where it points to. The next thing we're going to have is our experience needed. And basically I use this experience formula in most of my games. It's just your player info, your level, the player's level, times 100 times the level again. And as I explained in the basic tutorials, if you want the levels to continually to increase and get harder and harder, so a level 4 would actually be 4 times 100, which is 400 times 4 again, which is 1600. So instead of just doing player level times 100, making it only 400 experience to get to level 4, you actually have to get to 1600. And then if your experience exceeds your experience needed, then we're going to do this level up button right here. The level up I've basically never really created, because it all depends on how you're going to make your game. What kind of classes, if you're going to have classes, what your stats are going to be, because you're probably not going to copy what I have exactly. So, but what you can do is you can copy level up, or basically take the same idea from any of the other games in here and copy it over and make it however you want. Then the next thing we're going to have is our hit points back, which is basically just, let me show you how I built this. And this is kind of also in the basic tutorials. The H points back is, here it is. Well, that's H points. Where's the H points back? Make sure I'm looking at the right one. Oh, that's why it's the div. It's actually bar back. My bad. So here's our background. Here's our bar back. Basically, it's the health icon, and then we're going to take and place the hit points images, the image, and make the width the width up here. So the player hit points divided by the max hit points times 100. So that's just gonna give you a percentage of how many ever hit points they have, and make it to where when they get hit, the width of this green bar, this green block will grow and shrink as your player gets hit or whatever. And same way with the food and the water, to where it's gonna rate it. It's gonna create that length of however longer it is, depending on your max hit points. So if you've got 10 hit points max and you only got 5, it's gonna be 50%, and that's what that math does. And this is all basically the same right here. It's just echoing out and doing the same figure for all three of those. And you can just take those divs that are in our style CSS and actually place them wherever you want, and change those around if you want them in a different place, because all of your, let me scroll past this map, all of your hit points back, all that stuff is right here, and really position relative. Your left is, I'm keeping it 10. Now remember, being that it's relative, your top and your left is going to be based on that table number. It's going to be inside that table. So no matter where that table ends up, these are going to be relative to the table, so they're going to change with the table. And that's basically all there is to this panel. This panel over here is pretty much probably even more simple. It is just all I'm doing is echoing out a reference and an actual link to the tickets, and then a link to the inventory. Now if you notice, I'm actually linking it back to index.php, but I am